So now we'll come up to the next topic where we will discuss about developing the search strategy. So as we discussed or as we saw in the protocol that there are some databases which we specify in the protocol what we are going to study. And our research question will guide us to create a search strategy. Search strategy is a string of search terms which we are going to use uh, to search the studies which are of relevance to our study question. They have different Boolean terms which are used along with the subject terms. For example, we want each and every study which assesses technology and education. So, and would technology and education would be subject specific terms, whereas and the word and it's a Boolean term which will be included on search strategy to specify to include only those studies which have both these terms included as the indexed term. So the search strategy is the plan for how relevant research studies will be identified. The review question and conceptual framework shape the selection criteria. The selection criteria specifies the studies to be included in a review and thus are a key driver of the search strategy. A key consideration will be whether the search aims to be exhaustive, that is, aim to try and find all the primary research that has addressed the review question. The search strategy will detail the sources to be searched and the way in which the sources will be searched. For example, if we are targeting to search the PubMed for the clinical articles, we generally use PubMed. So how this PubMed will be searched is also part of search strategy. So exhaustive search strategy would usually include all the sources using multiple bibliographic databases. So what happens is that each and every study or each and every published article is not indexed in each and every database. There are multiple databases, even for the clinical studies. If we are going to search, there are multiple databases which are available because all the studies are not indexed in one single database. So we have Embase, we have Cochrane, we have PubMed, we have Sinhal, we have PsycInfo. There are multiple um, databases where these studies are indexed. So while doing a systematic review, multiple databases has to be considered for searching the relevant studies. So bibliographic databases usually index academic journals and thus are an important potential source. So bibliographic databases usually index records according to their topic using keywords. So what happens when we publish an article, generally while publishing, the portal asks you to enter some keywords which are relevant in your study. So what they do with these keywords are the indexing terms, and these are the keywords which help in searching while we do the systematic review. So I have shown an example of a search string which has been created to search anything related to Alzheimer disease. So what we have used is Alzheimer disease, Alzheimer, or Alzheimer's, or some kind of terms which may be present or in index, which may be present in the title, which may be present in the abstract, which may be present in the body of the research article. So this is type of a search string which we are going to use in a particular systematic reviews. These OR capital means or the indexing maybe of the paper might be with Alzheimer disease, or it may be only Alzheimer's or only Alzheimer. So these are the different terms for the same disease, but any of these might be present in that particular study. So we have to consider all these, combining them with the Boolean term OR. We have three Boolean terms, or, where we are using the synonyms of a particular term, then we use or. If we are interested in including two terms that should be present in your particular article, for example, technology and education. Then to combine them, we use and as a Boolean term. Or if we can, if we don't want any particular study, for example, we don't want any study in geriatric, then we use the third term, which is not. While we conduct the searches, we specify that not geriatric as a word, so that the searches will not pick up those studies where the term geriatric has been used in title or abstract of the particular study. So this is an example. So however, in most fields, including education, relevant search is published in a range of journals, which may be indexed in different bibliographic databases. And thus, it may be important to search multiple bibliographic databases. Further, some search is published in books for educational purposes, social sciences purposes, humanities purposes. Lot of research is published in books, and an increasing amount of research is not published in academic journals, or at least may not be published there as at a first go. So thus it is important to consider how you will find relevant search in other sources, including unpublished or gray literature. So in that case, internet is a valuable resource for this purpose and should also be included in any search strategy. Moving further, we have just I have highlighted few of the search sources where you can search for the relevant articles you want. The internet includes global specialized websites, Google Scholar, Microsoft Academic, Research Scholar, or some these kind of websites you can use. We have bibliographic databases, which are sometimes subject specific. Like for education, we have ERIC, Education Resources Information Center. We have generic databases like Asia, where applied social science index and abstracts are available, and you can perform your searches over there to get the answers to your relevant research question. Hand searching of specialist journals or books. Some journals are not indexed in these databases, so you have to go to that journal webpage alone and then find out if anything has been published. Books are not indexed, so you have to hand search them. And contact, sometimes gray literature has to be searched, where you can contact with your experts who can provide you the unpublished literature. And citation checking, it is that if a review has already been done on the similar topic of your interest, then you can check the references of that particular review, so that you can get an idea what relevant references you might get. Then study selection process. So now in the process of doing a systematic review, we have reached to a stage where we have developed our research question, where we have drafted our protocol and defined our inclusion and exclusion criteria. Now, according to our inclusion and exclusion criteria, we have worked upon our search strategy. Now the searches have run and you have got the hits. Now from that hits, you have to find, or you have to select the studies which are very relevant and which fit in your inclusion and exclusion criteria of your review question. So studies identified by the search are subject to a process of checking, sometimes referred to as screening, to ensure that they meet the selection criteria. In case of example of technology and education, we'll go further deep into those studies which have come after search strategy. For example, we got a study where it is that technology and education has been assessed, but in a different way as we wanted. So that particular study will not be of interest. Or technology and education assessment study has been there, but it is in different language, and we cannot access that data, we cannot read that, so it doesn't fit our inclusion criteria. Or a study which was conducted in population which has 10 to 15 years of children, which has studies which had three different groups of study: 10 to 15 years, geriatric, and 21 to 30 years. But there is no subgroup data for your particular population of interest, then you might exclude it because it is not of interest. Or there are some studies where you didn't find that the outcomes you have decided in your protocol is not there in the study. So you will exclude that study. So there are multiple ways and multiple steps where these studies are getting excluded, and finally you reach to a funnel point where only few studies are relevant to answer your review questions. So this is usually done in two stages. The screening is done in two stages. First is the primary screening, where you screen those studies, those hits, only through the titles and abstract information. So, you screen all the titles and abstracts after the hits come up. And once those abstracts and titles have been screened, and out of, for example, 5,000 studies that have come up after search hits, you came up with just 1,000 studies which you find through titles and abstract that yes, they are a little relevant, but you are not sure because abstract doesn't provide the complete information. So then you try to find the full text of those articles. Then after getting the full copy of that particular paper, you screen them again through your inclusion and exclusion criteria and find the more details. For example, the study we just discussed, that it had 10 to 15 age group as well, geriatric as well, adolescents as well. But then in the abstract, it was not clear that if the subgroup is present in it or not. Then you have to read the full copy of that paper, and you will find that yes, 10 to 15 age group subgroup is not present into that particular study, so it will be excluded from that review. So this is a process. In this process, in a study selection process or a screening process, you will need to have two reviewers, because sometimes there are chances of missing anything. So to avoid any exclusion of any relevant citation, or inclusion of any irrelevant citation or paper, you want to double check it. So systematic review process after the searching, it is always a three-step process or a three-stage process in which three people will assess the same study. Reviewer one and reviewer two will assess, will do the primary screening. And if there are any conflicts, that reviewer one says that this paper should be included and reviewer two says it should be excluded, then a third person who is an independent reviewer or independent QA person will check and finally give the decisions that whether the study should be included or excluded. So this happens at both the stages, primary screening and secondary screening. So that's why I told you in the beginning that there is always a teamwork in systematic reviews and cannot be done in silos. Then comes the coding of the study, the basic coding of the study, where once relevant studies have been selected after the screening process, reviewers need to systematically identify and record the information from the study that will be used to answer the review question. So the information in the protocol, you have already defined what kind of information you are extracting from that particular citation. So the information includes the characteristics of the study, the basic characteristics of the study, which includes where the study was conducted, how many patients were there, or how many participants were there, what was the study design, what is a cross-sectional survey study, what was it, an observational study, was it an randomized control trial, what kind of study, what was the inclusion and exclusion criteria of that particular study. So all these things are basic characteristics of the study. So the coding describes the details of the study to enable mapping of what search has been undertaken. So it tells you the basic ideas of what kind of research has been done, how the research was undertaken by study method, study design to allow assessment of quality and relevance of the study in the review question. Further, we have the results of each study so that these can be synthesized to answer the review question. So this all is done normally in softwares. So for one example is that Epicenter's bespoke systematic review software, which is named as Epi Reviewer. This is a software where you can extract all the information you want to extract from one paper Doing that, subsequently, you will extract the second paper, third paper, and finally, you will get a data sheet in which you will see how many papers you have extracted and what is the information they have reported it. So decisions about which information to record will be made by the review team based on the review question and conceptual framework. As we discussed, we need to have these decisions in the protocol itself to decide what kind of information we need and how it needs to be extracted. So, for example, a systematic review about the relationship between school size and student outcomes, collected data from primary studies about each school funding, teachers, students, and school organizational structure, as well as about the research methods used in the study. The information coded about the methods used in the research will vary depending upon the research included, type of research included, and approach that will be used to assess the quality of the relevant studies. So that all will change accordingly. Moving further, we have next section where we'll do quality appraisal or critical appraisal of the study. So there are broadly three elements which are considered in the critical appraisal of a particular study to be included in the systematic review, which includes the appropriateness of the study design, where the study design is appropriate to answer the review question, the quality of execution of the study method, whether the study methods were appropriate to conduct that particular study, the study's relevance to the review question. Is that study really relevant to be included into the review is another question which is critically appraised to check that inclusion. Many published scales are available for assessing the study quality. And quality scales for appraising qualitative research tends to focus on extent to which the study is authentic in reflecting the meaning of the data. See, for quantitative study, we have the numbers which show the results, which show the status of the study, the quality of the study, how the research has been conducted. But for qualitative, where we don't have the data, so we have to focus on the authentication of the study. We try to focus on finding the authenticity of the study and what it is interpreting actually. When we extract the data or when we code the data, it is in terms of quantitative data, we have different kinds of data. It is like it can be a dichotomous data or a continuous data. Dichotomous means yes or no kind of data. Means there can be only full-fledged values is only possible. For example, drug A increases the chances of survival in 10 patients or 100 patients out of 200 which has been assessed during the study. It can't be 100.1 or 100.2 patients. So it's a dichotomous data. That whole number should be the result. While in continuous data, it is a continuous data where the answer can be in points as well. For example, the survival was increased by 10.4 years. So that's a continuous data. So this is also defined in the protocol that while we are extracting about survival, what we would be extracting the continuous data, that is the survival in years, or we will be extracting the dichotomous data, that is the number of patients who have increased overall survival. So this is an example of the data, different kind of data that is being extracted while doing the systematic review. This all depends on the type of research question you are assessing. If it's an education based, so the data will be different. It's an clinical trial based, so the data form would be different. Then we have finally the synthesis. We want now the answer. So synthesis is more than a list of findings from the included studies. What we have found now, we have we developed the research question, we had drafted the protocol, we conducted the searches, we got the hits, we did the primary screening, we did the secondary screening, we did the data extraction. Data extraction is again a 3-review process in which 2 reviewers will both independently working will extract the data, and a third QA reviewer will assess the data. If there are any conflicts between the two reviewers who has extracted, will be sorted out. And then now the data is available with us. All the data is now available. The findings are available. Now we'll assess, or we'll synthesize the conclusion. So it is an attempt to integrate the information from individual studies to produce a better answer to the review question that is provided by the individual studies. So in case of systematic literature review, this is the ending that we integrated the information from the individual studies and found the conclusion descriptively. But if it is a SLR plus meta-analysis, now this data, what we have extracted so far, will serve as a food to conduct the meta-analysis, to conduct a mathematical algorithms to create a result which will support the descriptive results we have concluded. So meta-analysis of systematic reviews often use statistical techniques to combine data from the examined individual research studies and use the pooled data to come to a new statistical conclusion. So this is called meta-analysis, and it represents a specialist subset of systematic review. So mind it that not all systematic reviews include meta-analysis, because there are purely descriptive systematic reviews as well, but all meta-analysis are found in systematic reviews. So meta-analysis, the study which is titled as meta-analysis will have a systematic review before conducting any statistical techniques. Simply put, a systematic review refers to the entire process of selecting, evaluating, and synthesizing all the available evidence, while the term meta-analysis refers to the statistical approach to combine that data we have derived from the systematic review. So conclusions produced by meta-analysis are statistically stronger, and the analysis of any single study. Obviously, meta-analysis, for example, we conducted technology and education assessment impact assessment study. When we were studying individual studies, there were studies of about 100 patients, 100 respondents, or we had some studies with 50 respondents, or some might have 10 respondents. But when we have combined the data in a systematic review format, it might result that we finally got into meta-analysis 2000 respondents or even more than that. So that produce actually statistically stronger results. Due to increased number of subjects, greater diversity among subjects. For example, individual studies, we studied from Chennai, some studies were reported in Singapore, some might studies in Tamil Nadu, some might of Delhi. But when we combined in meta-analysis, we have combined the diversity of these subjects as well. And then accumulated effects results. So meta-analysis have become common in social and biomedical sciences nowadays. So there are a number of different metrics or effect size, selection of which is principally determined by the structure of outcome data. How the outcome data is there, so you can have different kind of outputs. If the data data for input is in continuous form, then the outcome would be different. If it is a dichotomous data, then the outcome would be different. So outcome data with a dichotomous structure can be transformed to OR, absolute risk, or relative risk, or standard. For dichotomous, it is standard mean difference. So this is just an example. There are multiple other ways where you can get the output. So I've just shown you a forest plot. This kind of plot is known as a forest plot, where on the in the first column in the extreme left, we can see it is the study names. Then on the second column, we have the effect of treatment. N by N means 15 patients out of 131 treated have the particular outcome. Whereas control arm, like placebo or something like that, in this case, 22 out of 137 patients showed any kind of effect. So this is a dichotomous data. And this is these lines show that the results are favoring the treatment or the control. So this is an risk ratio. So this is more of a healthcare kind of forest plot. So I'll not go into details what these risk ratio shows or what these arrows shows. So, but it's just an example of the meta-analysis output. So now although we have discussed the applications of systematic reviews in an earlier discussions as well, but we'll go in little more detail that how these systematic reviews are helpful in social sciences or humanities kind of things, or healthcare even. It says that politicians and policymakers are increasingly interested now in this evidence-based decision making. They don't want to make a decision on one study saying that, oh, this study is saying so we should apply in our policy, or we should include in this policy, or we should create a white paper for based on one single citation. So that is not actually right. So they are under pressure to look to research for solutions to policy problems and to justify programs by reference to the knowledge base. So this is very important nowadays. So for policymakers, systematic reviews may provide robust, reliable summaries of most reliable evidence, a valuable backdrop of evidence on which decisions about the policy can draw. Right? So we'll try. So we have studied whole process. We have understood few of the applications. So now we'll try to get a why or when do we actually do a systematic review? When there is an uncertainty, for example, about the effectiveness of a policy or a service where there has been some previous research on the issue has already been done, then we'll try to find out that this policy was implemented in 2016 or something. So what happened after that? We need to collect that data. The data is collected and put into a systematic review format, and then meta-analysis is done, and then you reach to a conclusion. This is an example. So in another case, in this case, the policy was already made and implemented. In another case, in early stages of development of a policy, when the policy is yet to be made, so what kind of effects can be anticipated? So this can be done through a systematic review. So when it is known that there is a wide range of research on a subject, already wide research has already been done on a particular subject, but there are still many questions which remain unanswered. So in that case, a systematic review is done. So another example is when a general overall picture of the evidence in a topic area is needed to direct future research. When there is a requirement and we can understand that there is a requirement of future research, then systematic reviews really help, so that they can guide us that what already has been done in that particular area and what new can be done in that particular area. So in that case, systematic reviews are helpful. And when an accurate picture of past research is required, so in that cases, systematic reviews are really beneficial. So not only this, systematic reviews also support in funding application. When you are applying for any funding, you can have a systematic review into that funding proposal, and that might help you to show whether your research topic has been tackled previously. You can actually show like pilot study, although necessary time consuming, it's a time consuming process, but still it creates a great impact. Then put your research in the context to other works in the field. So what other works has already been conducted, but what you can do it in different way, or might result in a different thing. So that also helps. To establish relevance, a proposal for original research is strengthened by supporting literature that can demonstrate that your question is worth answering. So which has not been done previously satisfactorily. So that might help you in getting more of funding resources. Further, to support bids for funding and sponsorship in the competitive arena, that is research funding and research proposal, it can demonstrate it is not reinventing the wheel. through conducting a systematic review, you can actually show that you are not reinventing the wheel and you are doing something new. And the things which are already done in the similar area but not the same area as you are doing. So these are the type of things which can really help you while you're funding applications. Then we have few examples in the social sciences or related topics, just for your reference, where a review of research on effect of psychosocial stress upon performance. Systematic review of literature dealing with the effects of stress on performance has been done. Performance can be any performance. It can be sports performance. It can be arts performance. It can be theater or anything. So it is actually assessing the effect of stress before the performance. So behavior therapy research with children. So nowadays there has a lot been behavioral changes among children. So that is again a point where evidence-based therapies can help. So evaluating the behavior therapy research and children published in any particular timeline as an experimental design. And another is educational production functions for teacher technology mixes. So this is the example we discussed so far in our discussion. So I know there would be a lot of questions in your minds, which I can take that up not through this session, but probably you can drop me a mail or drop me a WhatsApp message with your query, and I'll try to get back to you over those queries as soon as possible. Thank you.